How many times have you started a new journey with a heart full of fire only to find yourself standing still just a few weeks later wondering where all that energy went? You know exactly what needs to be done because you have read the books and watched the videos and mapped out the perfect plan in your mind, yet for some reason the gap between knowing and doing remains a vast canyon that you cannot seem to bridge. It is a familiar cycle that haunts the ambitious and the dreamers alike, where the initial burst of enthusiasm convinces you that this time will be different, but as the days turn into weeks the novelty fades and the emotional high that carried you through the first few steps begins to evaporate, leaving you face to face with the mundane reality of repetition. This is the moment where most people surrender, not because they lack the desire to change or the capability to achieve greatness, but because they have built their entire strategy on a foundation of sand known as motivation. Motivation is a fickle friend that visits you when the sun is shining and the conditions are perfect, but abandons you the moment the storm clouds gather or fatigue sets in. When you rely on how you feel to dictate what you do, you become a slave to your fluctuating emotions, and your progress becomes a jagged line of starts and stops rather than a steady ascent toward your goals. The truth that separates the high achievers from the chronic starters is not superhuman willpower or an endless supply of inspiration, but rather a fundamental shift in mindset that prioritizes systems over feelings and commitment over convenience. You are about to discover that the secret to building an unstoppable habit does not lie in trying harder to force yourself into action, but in constructing a framework so robust that action becomes the path of least resistance. This is an invitation to step off the emotional roller coaster and learn how to install a mechanism of discipline that operates independently of your mood, so that you can finally stop restarting and start evolving into the person you have always intended to be. The end of emotional drifting. The greatest deception we practice upon ourselves is the belief that we must feel ready in order to begin a task, and this misconception is the invisible wall that separates the life we currently live from the life we desperately desire. We wake up in the morning and the very first thing we do is consult our internal state, like a sailor looking at the sky to see if the weather is favorable for sailing. But the problem with treating our emotions as the compass is that emotions are by their very nature volatile and untrustworthy guides that change with the wind. When you base your actions on how you feel, you are inadvertently signing a contract with mediocrity, because the human brain is wired for comfort and conservation of energy, which means that in any given moment of decision your biological impulse will almost always vote for the easier path rather than the right path. This is why you see people who are incredibly talented and full of potential spending their entire lives moving in circles, because they are waiting for a lightning strike of inspiration that never comes, or they are waiting for the heaviness of fatigue to lift before they take a step forward. They work when they feel excited, and they stop when they feel bored, and they procrastinate when they feel overwhelmed, and they restart only when the guilt of their inaction becomes too painful to bear. This pattern of living is what we call the cycle of the amateur, and it is a form of existence that lacks a structural anchor. You must realize that living impulsively is akin to floating on a vast ocean without a rudder, where the wind may push you forward occasionally, but it is just as likely to push you backward or sideways or smash you against the rocks. The wind represents your emotions and the external circumstances that you cannot control, while the rudder represents your discipline and your system, which are the only things you can control. If you have no rudder, you are at the mercy of the storm, and no matter how much you wish to reach a specific destination, you will never arrive there by accident. The exhaustion that plagues so many people today does not come from overwork or the physical demands of their labor, but rather it comes from the mental toll of constantly having to restart the engine. Every time you stop because you do not feel like continuing, you create a gap in your momentum, and bridging that gap when you decide to start again requires a massive amount of activation energy. It is far easier to keep a heavy wheel turning once it is in motion than it is to push it from a dead stop over and over again, yet this is exactly what we do when we negotiate with our alarm clocks or debate with ourselves about whether to go to the gym or sit down to write. The solution to this perpetual struggle is to remove the question entirely from your morning ritual. The moment you ask yourself, "Do I want to do this?" you have already lost the battle, because you have opened the door for your feelings to cast a vote on your destiny. The professional does not ask if he wants to train, he simply acknowledges that it is time to train, and that distinction shifts the entire psychological framework from one of preference to one of identity. Consider the mindset of an elite athlete like Michael Phelps, who trained for years without missing a single day regardless of holidays or birthdays or illnesses. He did not wake up on Christmas morning and wonder if he felt like swimming, because the decision had already been made years ago when he committed to the system. His body became a clock, and his discipline became the rudder that steered him through the days when the wind of motivation had completely died down. You do not need to be an Olympian to apply this principle, but you do need to understand that freedom is not doing whatever you want whenever you want it, but rather freedom is the ability to do what you have chosen to do regardless of the obstacles that arise within you. True liberty is being the master of your own actions rather than a servant to your passing moods. When you stop negotiating with yourself, you free up a tremendous amount of mental bandwidth that was previously wasted on internal conflict. Instead of spending your morning energy arguing with your own laziness, you channel that energy into the execution of the task at hand. This is the foundation of building an unstoppable habit, because a habit by definition is a behavior that has been automated to the point where it no longer requires significant willpower to initiate. However, before a behavior becomes automatic, it must first be structural. You cannot drift into excellence, and you cannot stumble into a legacy. You must build a framework that holds you upright on the days when you feel like collapsing. This framework begins with the acceptance that your feelings are valid indicators of your current state, but they are terrible directives for your future actions. You can feel tired and still work. You can feel uninspired and still create. You can feel afraid and still move forward. The separation of your performance from your feelings is the single most important skill you will ever develop in the pursuit of any long-term goal. It is the understanding that the work does not care about your mood, and the result does not ask how hard it was for you to show up, it only asks if you showed up. As we move deeper into the architecture of a high-performance life, we must examine the mechanism that allows us to bypass the frailty of willpower. Willpower is like a battery that drains throughout the day as we make decisions and resist temptations, and if you rely solely on willpower to drag you through your habits, you will eventually run out of power before the day is done. This is why we need a system. A system is a set of predetermined choices that you make once so that you do not have to make them 1,000 times. It is a way of designing your environment and your schedule so that the desired behavior becomes the path of least resistance. When you have a system, you do not need to muster up determination to figure out what to do next, because the next step has already been laid out for you. The mental load is lifted and you are free to focus simply on execution. The shift from an emotion-based life to a system-based life is not cold or robotic as some might fear, but rather it is deeply empowering because it gives you the reliability that you have been missing. It allows you to trust yourself again. Think about how many promises you have broken to yourself simply because you did not feel like keeping them in the moment, and think about how that has eroded your self-esteem over the years. Every time you say you will do something and then fail to do it because of a mood swing, you are teaching your subconscious mind that your word means nothing. Conversely, every time you act in spite of your feelings, you are rewriting your internal code and proving to yourself that you are the type of person who can be counted on. This is how confidence is built, not through affirmations spoken in the mirror, but through a stack of undeniable proof that you are capable of command. Once you have made the conscious decision to stop letting your emotions hold the steering wheel of your life, the immediate question becomes what replaces them. If motivation is no longer the fuel, then what is the engine that drives us forward? The answer lies in the construction of a personal infrastructure that is immune to the chaos of daily life. We often look at successful people and assume they possess a burning passion that wakes them up every single morning, but if you look closer you will find that what they actually possess is a boringly consistent routine that removes the need for passion on most days. This is the essence of a system. A system is not just a to-do list or a vague intention to do better, it is a rigid framework that dictates the who, what, where, and when of your actions, leaving no room for ambiguity. Ambiguity is the enemy of habit formation because it forces your brain to think, and whenever your brain has to think about a difficult task, it will naturally look for an escape route. To eliminate this, you must design your habits with 3 non-negotiable components: a fixed time, a simplified sequence, and a clear standard of completion. Let us dissect the first component, which is the fixed time anchor. When you say you will exercise sometime tomorrow, you are essentially lying to yourself, because sometime is a space that does not exist on a clock. Without a specific time slot assigned to a task, it remains an abstract concept floating in the ether of your mind, easily displaced by urgent emails or social media scrolling or sudden fatigue. However, when you assign a specific time, such as 6 a.m. to a specific action, your brain begins to anticipate the event. Over time, this temporal trigger signals your body to prepare for the activity before you even consciously think about it, much like how you naturally feel hungry at the same time every day if you eat on a schedule. The second component is the simplified sequence, which refers to the removal of friction in the starting process. The hardest part of any habit is the first 2 minutes, because that is when the resistance is highest, so your system must make starting so easy that it would be ridiculous to say no. If you want to run in the morning, your clothes should be laid out the night before, your shoes should be by the door, and your water bottle should be filled. You are essentially preloading the decision, so that the version of you that wakes up groggy and unmotivated has simply to step into the process rather than construct it from scratch. The third component is a clear standard of completion, which means knowing exactly what counts as a win for the day. Many people fail because their goals are too vague, like read more or work hard, which leaves them constantly feeling inadequate. A system requires binary metrics such as read 10 pages or write 500 words, so that you can unequivocally check the box and trigger the dopamine release that reinforces the behavior. This structure is what allows you to act even when your internal world is in turmoil. It is the railway track that keeps the train moving forward, regardless of whether the passengers inside are happy or sad. Furthermore, we must address the scientific reality of how action influences emotion, because most people have the equation backward. We tend to believe that we must feel inspired to take action, which is why we wait for the muse to strike or the mood to be right. This is a passive approach to life that leaves you waiting at the bus stop for a bus that may never come. Modern behavioral psychology and neuroscience have demonstrated a phenomenon often referred to as the do something principle, which states that action is not just the effect of motivation but also the cause of it. When you physically engage in a task, even reluctantly, your brain releases neurotransmitters that align your mental state with your physical activity. It is the motion that creates the emotion. Think of a heavy flywheel that is difficult to push at first. The first few rotations require immense effort and you feel no momentum whatsoever, but as you continue to push, the wheel begins to store kinetic energy and eventually it starts to spin with its own force, carrying you along with it. This is exactly how a habit works. The first 5 minutes of writing or exercising or studying are often painful and filled with mental resistance, but once you break through that initial barrier, you enter a state of flow where the work becomes easier and the resistance fades. By building a system that forces you to start, you are guaranteeing that you will reach that state of flow consistently rather than accidentally. You are manufacturing your own inspiration. This is how a writer like Stephen King produces novels with such regularity, not by waiting for a divine spark but by sitting in the chair at the same time every day and typing until he reaches his word count. He does not write because he is inspired because he writes. This reversal of cause and effect is the superpower of the disciplined. It means you are no longer a victim of your lethargy but the architect of your energy. You realize that you can change your state by changing your activity. If you are feeling sluggish, the answer is not to lie down and wait for energy to return. The answer is to move your body and generate the energy you need. If you are feeling stuck on a problem, the answer is not to procrastinate until a solution appears. The answer is to start working on the parts you do understand and let the momentum unveil the rest. This proactive stance fundamentally alters your relationship with difficulty. Instead of seeing difficulty as a sign to stop, you see it as the friction necessary to generate heat and momentum. You begin to understand that the feeling of not wanting to do it is not a stop sign, it is merely the sensation of the flywheel starting to turn. Every time you push through that sensation, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become, and you are strengthening the neural pathways that make it easier to do it again tomorrow. The cumulative effect of these small systemic actions is staggering. We often underestimate what we can achieve in a year because we overestimate what we can do in a day. We try to sprint a marathon and burn out in the first mile. A system, however, is built for the marathon. It prioritizes consistency over intensity. It understands that a mediocre workout done every day is infinitely more valuable than a perfect workout done once a month. It values the streak. It values the rhythm. It values the act of showing up above all else. When you operate from a system, you detach your self-worth from the immediate outcome and attach it to the adherence to the process. You do not judge yourself by how good the writing was today, you judge yourself by whether you wrote. You do not judge yourself by how fast you ran, you judge yourself by whether you laced up your shoes. This shift in perspective is liberating because the process is entirely within your control, whereas the outcome often is not. By focusing on the system, you reclaim your power and you build a fortress of habits that protects you from the unpredictability of life. The architecture of focus. The trajectory of your entire life is often determined by the trajectory of your morning, because the first hour of the day serves as the rudder for the remaining 23 hours. Most people wake up and immediately surrender their sovereignty to the demands of the outside world without even realizing they have lost the battle before they have stepped out of bed. The modern morning ritual has become a chaotic descent into reactivity, where the very first action is to reach for a smartphone and scroll through notifications, emails and news feeds. This act seems harmless on the surface, but biologically and psychologically it is catastrophic for anyone attempting to build a high-performance life. When you flood your brain with external information the moment you open your eyes, you are essentially inviting the chaos of the world into your sanctuary before you have had a chance to build your defenses. You are training your brain to be reactive rather than proactive, and to consume rather than create. You are telling your subconscious mind that the priorities of other people, whether they are your boss sending an email or a stranger posting on social media, are more important than your own internal peace and your own strategic goals. This state of reactivity creates a background hum of anxiety that persists throughout the day, causing you to feel rushed and scattered even when there is no immediate emergency. You feel as though you are constantly playing catch up because you started the race on your back foot. To break this cycle and establish a habit that is truly unstoppable, you must treat the first hour of your day as sacred ground that is strictly off limits to the outside world. This is what we call the golden hour, and it is the time when you establish the tone for everything that follows. During this period you must be the architect of your reality rather than the victim of your circumstances. The goal of the golden hour is to center yourself and to prime your mind for the specific challenges ahead. It is about tuning your internal instrument before you walk out onto the stage to perform. If you look at the biographies of history's most prolific figures, from Benjamin Franklin to modern titans of industry, you will find a common thread of jealous protection over their morning routines. Franklin notably began his day by asking himself, "What good shall I do this day?" a question that oriented his mind toward purpose and contribution rather than obligation and stress. You do not need a complex routine to achieve this, but you do need a boundary. This means physically separating yourself from your devices and creating a buffer zone where you can hear your own thoughts. In this silence you can engage in practices that build mental fortitude, such as journaling your primary objectives, visualizing the successful completion of your tasks, or simply sitting in stillness to cultivate a sense of calm authority. This practice is not an indulgence, it is a strategic necessity. When you start the day with a sense of control, that feeling of agency carries over into every meeting, every conversation and every decision you make. You become less easily rattled by unexpected problems because your foundation is solid. Conversely, when you start the day in a frenzy, every small bump in the road feels like a crisis because your nervous system is already primed for fight or flight. The difference between a day where you feel like a master and a day where you feel like a servant is often found in those first 60 minutes. Furthermore, this practice of reclaiming the morning is the most effective way to combat the epidemic of decision fatigue that plagues so many of us. We have a finite amount of cognitive energy each day, and every decision we make, from what to wear to what to eat to how to reply to a message, drains a small amount of that energy. By the time the afternoon rolls around, many people are operating on empty, which leads to poor choices, procrastination, and a lack of discipline. By structuring your morning into a predictable ritual, you eliminate the need to make decisions during your most valuable hours. You do not have to decide what to do because the routine decides for you. You wake up, you drink water, you move your body, you review your goals, and you begin your most important work. This automation preserves your mental battery for the complex problems that actually require your creative power. It is a form of energy management that ensures you are bringing your best self to the things that matter most, rather than wasting your best self on trivialities. As you begin to implement this protection of the morning, you will likely face an intense urge to reconnect with the digital world, a sensation that reveals just how deeply addicted our brains have become to the dopamine loop of constant connectivity. It will feel uncomfortable to sit in silence or to read a book without checking your phone, but this discomfort is exactly where the growth happens. You are retraining your brain to be comfortable with solitude and focus. You are reclaiming your attention span, which is the currency of achievement in the 21st century. The ability to sit with yourself and direct your thoughts is a superpower that has become increasingly rare and therefore increasingly valuable. As you persist in this practice, the morning will transform from a time of stress into a time of immense power. You will begin to look forward to waking up because you know that for that first hour you are completely free from the expectations of others. It is your time to invest in yourself before you invest in the world. This investment pays dividends that compound over time. A person who starts every day with clarity and intention will eventually outpace a person who starts every day with chaos and reaction, regardless of talent or intelligence. The cumulative effect of hundreds of focused mornings creates a life of direction and purpose. It anchors the habit system you are building, ensuring that no matter how crazy the day gets, you have already secured a victory in the first hour. This daily victory builds a reservoir of self-respect. You know that you are the kind of person who puts their own development first, not out of selfishness but out of the understanding that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You are filling your own reservoir so that you can serve your work, your family, and your mission with greater capacity. Once the morning is secured and your mind is primed, the next challenge is to maintain that level of focus as you step into the noise of the day. This brings us to the necessity of structuring your time not as a continuous stream of busyness but as a series of deliberate blocks designed for deep work. The transition from the golden hour to the rest of the day must be managed with the same level of intentionality, otherwise the clarity you cultivated in the morning will be washed away by the first wave of distractions. You must carry the shield of your morning routine into the battlefield of your daily schedule. The modern world is designed to fragment your attention into 1,000 jagged shards, and if you do not actively fight against this entropy, you will find yourself living a life of shallow busyness rather than deep productivity. We often confuse activity with achievement, believing that because we are moving fast and juggling multiple balls at once we are making progress, but in reality we are simply spinning in circles. This illusion of multitasking is the great productivity lie of our generation. Neuroscience has repeatedly shown that the human brain is incapable of focusing on two complex tasks simultaneously. What we call multitasking is actually rapid task switching, where the brain frantically toggles back and forth between demands. Each time you switch from writing a report to checking a notification and then back again, there is a cognitive cost known as attention residue. A part of your brain remains stuck on the previous task, and it takes a significant amount of time, often up to 20 minutes, to fully re-engage with the original work at a deep level. If you interrupt yourself every 10 minutes, you are effectively ensuring that you never reach your peak cognitive potential. You spend your entire day in the shallows dealing with surface-level problems while the profound work that requires sustained concentration remains untouched. The result is a day that feels exhausting yet unproductive, leaving you wondering why you worked so hard but accomplished so little. The antidote to this fractured existence is the cultivation of deep work through the method of time blocking. Imagine your day not as a liquid stream where activities bleed into one another but as a series of solid concrete blocks. Within each block you assign one single objective and you pursue it with a ferocity that excludes all else. This is the mindset of the laser versus the floodlight. A floodlight illuminates a large area but has no cutting power, whereas a laser focuses all its energy on a single microscopic point and can cut through steel. When you block out 90 minutes for a specific task, you are turning yourself into a laser. During this time you are unavailable to the world. You close the door, you turn off the internet, you silence the phone, and you enter a pact with yourself to do nothing but the task at hand. This level of isolation can feel terrifying at first because we have become addicted to the noise of constant connection, but it is in this silence that true value is created. It is in the deep blocks that books are written, code is debugged, strategies are formulated, and complex skills are mastered. Author Cal Newport and many high performers operate on this principle, understanding that 3 or 4 hours of deep focused work are worth more than 8 hours of distracted fragmented effort. This approach not only increases the quality of your output but paradoxically it also preserves your energy. It is far more draining to constantly restart your brain after every interruption than it is to maintain a steady state of flow. When you are in flow, the work carries you. When you are distracted, you are constantly fighting against friction. By adopting time blocking, you are also forcing yourself to confront the reality of your time. When you list your tasks and assign them specific blocks, you quickly realize that you cannot do everything, and this realization is healthy. It forces you to prioritize ruthlessly and to say no to the trivial many so that you can focus on the vital few. You stop agreeing to things that do not move the needle because you can see physically on your schedule that there is no block available for them. This creates a boundary around your time that commands respect from others. When people see that you treat your time as a scarce and valuable resource, they begin to treat it with the same respect. Conversely, if you are always available and always responsive, you are signaling that your time has little value. Implementing this requires a shift in identity from being a reactive responder to being a proactive executor. You must become comfortable with being temporarily unreachable. You must accept that you might miss an email for an hour or that a message might sit unread while you finish your block. The fear of missing out is powerful, but the pain of mediocrity is far worse. You have to decide if you want to be the person who responds to everyone else instantly but never achieves their own dreams, or the person who is occasionally slow to reply but delivers work of exceptional quality. The block mindset applies not just to work but to every area of life. If you are with your family, be with them fully in a block of connection without the intrusion of work. If you are exercising, do it in a block of physical intensity without checking emails between sets. Wherever you are, be there completely. This compartmentalization reduces anxiety because you know that there is a time and a place for everything. You do not need to worry about work while you are relaxing because you know there is a block for work tomorrow. You do not need to feel guilty about resting because you know you crushed your work block earlier. It brings a sense of order and sanity to the chaotic rhythm of modern life. As you practice this, the blocks will become the containers for your habits. You will no longer try to squeeze a habit into the cracks of your day, you will build the day around the habits that matter. You will defend these blocks as if your life depended on them, because in a very real sense the quality of your life does depend on them. A life of broken focus is a life of broken dreams, but a life of deep focus is a life of realized potential. Qy acute ban roy. Ban 1 min via type don quoid a hone thun fan 2, cho do 3000 tu, tua he sang fan 3, de la don 3 kua fan 2, kong 1000 tu, don ni tap trung vau kai nian toi 20 iu cot, Keystone Habits, u2 cot loy gip ju vung kahi thong markung kan tun que new su keluc. Va ket tuk fan 2. Part 2, The Architecture of Focus, Segment 3. As we solidify the structure of the golden hour and the practice of deep work blocks, we arrive at the final pillar of the architectural phase, which addresses the overwhelming desire to change everything at once. A common trap for those seeking transformation is the belief that a new life requires a complete overhaul of every single behavior simultaneously. You want to wake up early and read more and eat healthy and exercise and learn a new language and save money, all starting on Monday morning. This approach is heroic, but it is also doomed to failure because it ignores the limited nature of human willpower. When you try to push all the gears of the machine at the same time, you generate so much friction that the engine stalls before it can even warm up. The secret to sustainable change is not in the quantity of habits you adopt, but in the strategic selection of what we call a keystone habit. A keystone in architecture is the central stone at the summit of an arch that locks all the other stones into place and allows the structure to bear weight. Without it, the arch collapses, but with it, the arch can support a cathedral. Similarly, in your life, there are certain habits that hold a disproportionate amount of power. These habits act as the lead dominoes that, when tipped over, naturally knock down a chain of other positive behaviors without requiring extra effort from you. The most classic example of a keystone habit is physical exercise. When a person commits to moving their body for 30 minutes every day, a fascinating ripple effect occurs throughout the rest of their life. Because they have exercised, they naturally start to crave healthier food to fuel their body, which improves their diet without a strict meal plan. Because they are physically tired in a healthy way, they fall asleep faster and sleep deeper, which improves their recovery. Because they are well rested, their focus sharpens the next day, leading to higher productivity at work. Suddenly, one habit has positively impacted diet, sleep, and career. This is the power of the keystone. It creates a spillover effect where success in one area breeds confidence and capacity in others. You stop seeing yourself as a lazy person trying to be active and start seeing yourself as an athlete who lives a disciplined life. The identity shift is profound. Another powerful keystone habit is the simple act of making your bed immediately upon waking. It seems trivial, almost insulting to your ambition, but consider the psychological signal it sends. By making your bed, you complete the very first task of the day. You achieve a small win before you have even brushed your teeth. This small win gives you a hit of dopamine and a sense of order that encourages you to complete the next task and then the next. It reinforces the belief that you are a person who respects your environment and finishes what you start. On days when everything else goes wrong, you can come home to a made bed and be reminded that you held your ground in at least one area. The goal here is to identify your own keystone habit and protect it with your life. Do not scatter your energy trying to fix every flaw. Find the one thing that centers you. For some it is meditation, for others it is a daily walk, for others it is financial tracking. Once you find it, make it the non-negotiable axis of your day. Even if the rest of the day falls apart into chaos, if you maintain your keystone habit, the system remains intact. It serves as the safety net that prevents a bad day from turning into a bad week. This concept liberates you from the pressure of perfection. You do not need to be perfect in 10 areas, you just need to be consistent in one major area and let the momentum of that consistency carry the rest. It simplifies the game of life. Instead of juggling 10 balls, you focus on holding tight to the one ball that is tethered to all the others. As you integrate the keystone habit with your golden hour and your deep work blocks, you are no longer just a person with a to-do list, you are a person with a functioning operating system. You have moved beyond the amateur cycle of emotional starts and stops. You have built a rudder to steer through the storm. You have created a sanctuary in the morning to prime your mind. You have carved out blocks of time to produce deep value. And you have identified the central habit that holds it all together. This architecture is robust. It is designed to withstand the pressures of modern life. But even the strongest building needs maintenance. A system that is never reviewed, never cleaned, and never adjusted will eventually degrade. You are not a robot, you are a biological organism living in a constantly changing environment. The strategies that work for you today might need adjustment next month. The energy you have this season might be different next season. Therefore, the final phase of building an unstoppable habit is learning how to sustain the system over the long haul. It involves the art of review, the power of social responsibility, and the absolute necessity of strategic rest. We must now turn our attention to the maintenance of the machine, because building the habit is only the beginning. Keeping it alive for a lifetime is the true mastery. You have the structure, now you need the sustainability. The long game. The greatest threat to the longevity of any habit system is not a lack of willpower but a lack of calibration, because we exist in a universe governed by entropy, where everything that is left unattended eventually declines into disorder. Many people make the fatal mistake of treating their habits like a stone monument, believing that once the structure is built it will stand forever without intervention, but the reality is that habits are more like a garden that requires constant tending. You cannot plant a seed and walk away expecting a harvest a year later without ever watering it or pulling the weeds or adjusting the soil. Life is dynamic, and the circumstances that surround you today are unlikely to be the exact same circumstances that surround you 6 months from now. Your job changes, your health fluctuates, your family demands shift, and your energy levels cycle with the seasons. If your system is rigid and unyielding, it will eventually snap under the pressure of these changes. This is why the person who clings blindly to a routine simply because that is how I have always done it is often the first to fail when a crisis hits. True discipline is not about robotic adherence to a static plan, it is about the fluid adaptation of principles to current realities. To survive the long game, you must transition from the mindset of a builder to the mindset of a gardener. The most effective tool for this maintenance is the weekly review. This is a non-negotiable appointment with yourself, usually scheduled at the end of the week, where you step out of the execution mode and step into the manager mode to audit your performance. During this time you strip away the emotions of the week and look at the cold hard data of your actions. You ask yourself 3 critical questions that serve as the diagnostic tools for your life. First, you ask what worked well this week. This is important because you need to acknowledge your wins to build momentum and identify the strategies that are delivering results so you can double down on them. Second, you ask what failed or caused unnecessary stress. This requires brutal honesty because you are looking for the friction points in your system. Did you miss your morning workout because you were lazy or because you stayed up too late working? Did you fail to read because the book was boring or because you didn't block the time? Diagnosing the root cause is essential because you cannot fix what you do not understand. Third, and most importantly, you ask what needs to be adjusted for the coming week. This is where the magic of adaptation happens. Perhaps you realize that trying to exercise at 5 a.m. is destroying your sleep quality, so instead of forcing it and burning out, you intelligently shift the block to 5 p.m. This is not quitting, this is strategic pivoting. It is the refusal to let the system become a prison. Elon Musk, despite running multiple massive companies, is known for his ruthless auditing of his own schedule, continuously asking if a meeting or a project is still serving a vital purpose, and if the answer is no, he cuts it immediately. He understands that time is a finite resource, and allowing low-value activities to clutter his calendar is a form of self-sabotage. You must apply this same ruthlessness to your own habits. Over time, weeds in the form of bad habits or inefficient activities will naturally start to grow in your garden. You might start checking your phone in bed again or allowing meetings to run over time. The weekly review is your chance to pull these weeds before they choke out the good plants. It is a reset button that allows you to start every Monday with a fresh, optimized plan rather than dragging the failures of the previous week behind you like a heavy chain. This process of continuous improvement is what the Japanese call Kaizen. It is the belief that small incremental changes made consistently over time lead to massive transformation. When you review and adjust weekly, you are getting 1% better every 7 days. Compound that over a year and you become unrecognizable. This flexibility protects you from the all-or-nothing mentality that destroys so many dreams. The perfectionist says, if I cannot do it perfectly, I will not do it at all, but the strategist says, I cannot do it perfectly right now, so I will adjust the plan to do what is possible. By giving yourself permission to modify the system, you remove the guilt associated with imperfection. You understand that a broken streak is not a failure of character, it is simply data indicating that the system needs a tweak. This perspective shift creates a psychological safety net. It means you can never truly fail, you can only learn and adjust. The goal is not to maintain the exact same routine for 50 years, the goal is to maintain the habit of excellence regardless of the form it takes. As you master this art of review, you will find that your system becomes a living, breathing extension of your will, capable of evolving as you evolve. It becomes resilient. It bends but does not break. And once you have established this internal loop of feedback and correction, you are ready to add the external layer of reinforcement that ensures you show up even when you don't want to. This brings us to the immense power of social accountability and the act of bringing your commitments out of the shadows and into the light, the long game. While the weekly review provides the internal compass for your journey, there remains a dangerous vulnerability in the system if it relies solely on your private integrity, because human beings are masters of self-deception. We have an almost infinite capacity to rationalize our own failures when there is no one else watching. When you make a promise to yourself in the quiet of your own mind, it is incredibly easy to renegotiate that promise the moment things get difficult. You tell yourself that you are too tired today, or that the weather is bad, or that you will simply do double the work tomorrow to make up for it. These excuses sound reasonable in the echo chamber of your own head because there is no external force to challenge them. This is why isolation is the enemy of excellence. Most people keep their goals secret to protect their ego, so that if they fail nobody will know and they can avoid the sting of embarrassment. But by shielding yourself from the potential of public failure, you are also stripping yourself of the most potent fuel for success, which is accountability. To make a habit truly unbreakable, you must drag it out of the shadows and place it in the light where others can see it. When a commitment is observed, it gains weight. It transforms from a vague wish into a binding contract. The psychology behind this is rooted in our deep social need for consistency and respect. We may break promises to ourselves with little guilt, but we are biologically wired to avoid breaking promises to the tribe, because historically our survival depended on our reputation as reliable members of the group. You can leverage this primitive mechanism to override your modern laziness. This does not mean you need to broadcast your every move to the entire world, but it does mean you need a layer of external observation. This can take many forms depending on your personality. For some, the simple act of keeping a visual scoreboard in a shared space is enough. If you live with family or roommates, placing a habit tracker on the refrigerator creates a subtle but powerful pressure. You know that they see the empty boxes on the days you skip, and that silent awareness pushes you to check the box even when you don't feel like it. For others, a more direct approach is necessary, such as an accountability partner. This is not just a cheerleader who tells you good job, but a guardian of your standard who asks the uncomfortable questions. You need someone who respects you enough to call you out when you are drifting. A text message sent every evening reporting whether you completed your Keystone habit creates a feedback loop that makes it harder to quit than to continue. The pain of having to admit I didn't do it to another person is often greater than the pain of actually doing the work, and you can use that fear of social discomfort as a tool to propel you through the moments of weakness. Arnold Schwarzenegger famously used this tactic early in his career by announcing his impossible goals to everyone he met. He told people he would be the greatest bodybuilder in history, and then he would become a movie star and then a politician. By verbalizing these audacious targets, he burned the bridges of retreat. He could not back down because his pride and his word were on the line. He created a scenario where the only way to save face was to work harder than anyone else. You do not need to be that extreme, but you do need to put some skin in the game. When you keep your ambitions hidden, you are essentially planning for a comfortable failure. When you share them, you are planning for a necessary success. This external layer acts as the scaffolding that holds the building up while the internal cement of discipline dries. There will be days when your internal drive is completely empty, when you don't care about the goal, and when the weekly review feels like a chore. On those dark days, it is the knowledge that someone else is watching or waiting that drags you out of bed. It is the external obligation that jumps-starts the engine until the internal generator kicks back in. This is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strategic intelligence. It is the recognition that you are fallible and that you need a fail-safe. Furthermore, participating in a community of like-minded individuals amplifies this effect. When you surround yourself with people who treat your desired habit as a normal standard of living, your behavior naturally elevates to match the group norm. If you want to read more, join a book club where not reading makes you the outlier. If you want to run, join a running group where waking up at 5 a.m. is considered normal, not crazy. We are the average of the people we spend the most time with, and by curating your social environment you are essentially hacking your own behavior. The collective energy of a group carries you when your individual energy wanes. It normalizes the struggle and validates the effort. In this context, accountability is not a burden, it is a form of support. It is the safety rope that catches you when you slip. It is the light that keeps the weeds of excuse from growing in the dark corners of your mind. By combining the internal calibration of the weekly review with the external pressure of social accountability, you create a pincer movement that leaves your laziness with nowhere to hide. You are attacking the resistance from both the inside and the outside simultaneously. This leaves only one final component to address in the long game, which is the preservation of the machine itself. A system that runs at full speed without ceasing will eventually overheat and destroy itself regardless of how much accountability is in place. To finish the race, you must learn the counterintuitive art of strategic recovery, not as a reward for work done but as a prerequisite for work to come. The master of energy and identity. The final barrier that stands between a temporary streak of success and a lifetime of mastery is the profound misunderstanding of energy management, because most people operate under the delusion that the only way to get more done is to work longer hours and push harder against the resistance. We live in a culture that glorifies the grind and wears exhaustion like a badge of honor, believing that sleep deprivation and constant busyness are signs of importance. However, when you are building a habit system designed to last for decades rather than days, this philosophy of relentless expenditure becomes dangerous. A machine that runs at maximum capacity without ever cooling down will inevitably suffer a catastrophic failure, and the human body and mind are no different. To make your habits truly unstoppable, you must fundamentally change your relationship with rest. You must stop viewing rest as the opposite of work or as a sign of weakness and start viewing it as an essential biological discipline that is just as productive as the work itself. This is what we call strategic recovery. It is the understanding that high performance is not a linear marathon of endless effort, but rather a series of rhythmic pulses oscillating between intense expenditure and deep renewal. If you look at the most elite performers in the world, from Olympic athletes to grandmaster chess players, you will find that they prioritize their recovery with the same obsessive precision that they apply to their training. Serena Williams does not just play tennis, she has a rigorous protocol for sleep, diet and mental decompression, because she knows that her ability to perform on the court is directly engaged to the quality of her recovery off the court. The amateur practices until they are tired and then quits, but the professional practice is managing their energy so they never have to quit. This requires you to schedule your rest with the same rigidity that you schedule your deep work blocks. It means understanding that your brain consumes a massive amount of glucose and produces metabolic waste products during intense concentration, and if you do not give it time to flush these toxins out, your cognitive abilities will degrade. You will experience brain fog, emotional irritability and a loss of willpower, which are the precursors to burnout. Burnout is not an emotional problem, it is a physiological rebellion. It is your body forcing you to stop because you refuse to stop voluntarily. To avoid this, you must implement cycles of active recovery into your daily, weekly and monthly rhythm. Active recovery is different from passive idleness. Scrolling through social media for 2 hours is not rest, it is low-grade stimulation that keeps your dopamine receptors firing and prevents your brain from entering a state of true relaxation. True rest involves activities that lower your cortisol levels and detach you completely from the demands of your system. This could include deep sleep, which is the foundation of all performance, or practices like meditation, nature walks, or simply sitting in silence without input. When you treat rest as a discipline, you protect your greatest asset, which is your capacity to show up tomorrow. You are playing the long game, and in the long game the person who can sustain a steady pace for 10 years will always overtake the person who sprints for 6 months and then collapses. This concept extends beyond just physical rest. It encompasses the management of your emotional and spiritual energy as well. There will be times in your life when the external pressures of family tragedy or financial crisis or illness weigh heavily on your system. In these moments, the rigid adherence to your habit list can feel like a suffocating burden. A master of energy knows when to shift gears. They understand that there is a difference between laziness and legitimate depletion. When you are lazy, you need a push, but when you are depleted, you need a pause. The system you have built must be flexible enough to accommodate these seasons of low energy without breaking completely. This might mean scaling back your Keystone habit to its bare minimum version during a crisis. Instead of the full-hour workout, you do 10 minutes of stretching. Instead of writing 1,000 words, you write 1 sentence. You keep the neural pathway open without draining your limited reserves. This is the art of survival within the system. It is the refusal to let the chain break even if the link is small. By managing your energy wisely, you ensure that you never reach the point of total system failure where you abandon the habit entirely. You learn to bend so that you do not break. As you integrate strategic recovery into your life, you will notice a paradox. By working fewer hours but with higher energy and sharper focus, you actually produce more value than when you were dragging yourself through long days of fatigue. The quality of your output increases because you are bringing a fresh mind to the task every single time. You are no longer fighting against the fog, you are cutting through it with clarity. This sustainable rhythm creates a sense of confidence that is unshakable because you know you are not relying on adrenaline or manic bursts of motivation. You are relying on a calculated cycle of stress and rest that you can maintain indefinitely. This transition from a frantic doer to a strategic manager of energy paves the way for the ultimate evolution in habit formation, which is the shift in identity. At the beginning of this journey, you were a person trying to perform a new behavior. You were a smoker trying to quit. You were a procrastinator trying to work. You were a couch potato trying to run. There was a separation between who you were and what you were doing. This separation creates friction because you are constantly acting against your own self-image. But as you stack the days and protect the system and manage your energy, something magical begins to happen in the neurology of your brain. The behavior moves from the conscious effortful part of your mind to the subconscious automatic part. You stop having to decide to do the habit and you simply become the person who does it. This is the moment of transcendence where the habit is no longer something you do, it is something you are. You do not run, you are a runner. You do not write, you are a writer. You do not save money, you are financially disciplined. This shift in identity is the holy grail of habit formation because once your identity changes, the behavior becomes permanent. You no longer need to use willpower to force yourself to act because it would actually feel more uncomfortable not to act. It would feel weird for a runner not to run. It would feel wrong for a writer not to write. The friction disappears and is replaced by a natural alignment between your soul and your actions. This is the state of being unstoppable. It is not about force, it is about flow. It is about reaching a point where your external life is a perfect mirror of your internal values. The transformation of identity is not an event that happens overnight with a sudden flash of insight, but is rather a subtle accumulation of evidence that slowly tips the scales of your self-perception. When you first begin to implement your system, there is often a painful gap between who you believe you are and what you are doing. You might be acting like a disciplined person by waking up at 5 in the morning, but inside you still feel like the lazy person who loves to sleep in. This sensation is known as cognitive dissonance, and it is the primary reason why so many people sabotage their own success. They feel like imposters in their own lives. They feel as though they are wearing a mask that does not fit, and the psychological pressure to return to their old comfortable identity is immense. However, the secret to bridging this gap is not to fake it until you make it, but to practice it until you become it. You must understand that every single action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. When you choose the salad over the burger, you are casting a vote for the identity of a healthy person. When you sit down to write one page, even when you have nothing to say, you are casting a vote for the identity of a writer. In the beginning these votes are few and the pile of votes for your old identity is massive, so the new behavior feels unnatural. But as you stick to the system day after day and week after week, the pile of new votes begins to grow. Eventually there comes a tipping point where the evidence of your new life outweighs the memories of your old life. Your brain, which craves consistency, looks at the data of your recent behavior and concludes that you must indeed be this new person because your actions prove it. This is the mechanism of genuine confidence. Confidence does not come from shouting affirmations in the mirror, it comes from a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. Once this shift occurs, the resistance that used to plague your mornings dissolves. You no longer have to argue with yourself about going to the gym because going to the gym is simply what you do. It becomes as natural as brushing your teeth. You have moved from a state of conscious incompetence where you know you are failing to conscious competence where you have to try hard to succeed, and finally to unconscious competence where you succeed without even thinking about it. This is the state where the habit has been fully integrated into your nervous system. You have rewired the neural pathways of your brain to default to discipline rather than comfort. At this stage you are no longer fighting against the current, you have become the current. The danger here lies in complacency, because once a habit becomes easy we often stop paying attention to it. We assume that because we are now a runner or a reader that we no longer need the system that got us there. This is a trap. Even a master must practice the scales. Even a champion must respect the fundamentals. The maintenance of identity requires the continued protection of the standards you have set. You must remain vigilant against the slow drift of mediocrity. It starts with skipping one day, then two, then a week, and before you know it the votes for the old identity start piling up again. Therefore, the process of identity shifting is not a destination at which you arrive and retire, it is a continuous process of becoming. You are perpetually under construction. The goal is to fall in love with the boredom of consistency. We are conditioned by movies and stories to look for the exciting montage where the hero transforms in 3 minutes of upbeat music, but real life is not a montage. Real life is the quiet work done in the dark when no one is watching. It is the unglamorous repetition of the same tasks over and over again. The amateur gets bored with this repetition and seeks novelty. The professional understands that repetition is the mother of mastery. The professional finds nuance in the mundane. They find joy in the slight improvement of their craft. They do not need the external applause because their satisfaction comes from the internal alignment of their actions with their values. This alignment brings a deep sense of peace. The anxiety of should I do this or should I do that disappears because the decision has already been made by your identity. You are free from the tyranny of choice in the small matters so that you can direct your energy toward the big matters. You stop wasting willpower on maintenance and start using it for creation. This is the ultimate freedom that discipline provides. It is not the freedom to be lazy, it is the freedom to be effective. It is the liberty to design a life that is not dictated by your impulses but directed by your highest intelligence. As you solidify this new identity, you also begin to affect the world around you in ways you may not anticipate. Your example becomes a silent invitation for others to rise. When people see you changing not through loud proclamations but through quiet consistent action, they are inspired to examine their own lives. You become a leader not by title but by example. Your system becomes a beacon of possibility. This is the ripple effect of the unstoppable habit. It starts within you but it does not end with you. It changes your health, your career, your relationships and your legacy. But remember, this power is fragile. It must be guarded. It must be nurtured. It creates a new baseline for your life, but that baseline must be defended every single day. The moment you think you have made it is the moment you start to slide back. So you must adopt the mindset of the eternal student, the beginner who is always learning, always refining and always showing up. You must embrace the paradox that you are enough exactly as you are and yet you are committed to getting better every day. This balance prevents the toxicity of perfectionism while fueling the drive for excellence. You are building a masterpiece, and that masterpiece is your own character, the legacy of discipline. When we stand back and look at the architecture of the human life, we realize that the difference between a life of regret and a life of fulfillment is rarely defined by a single catastrophic event or a single stroke of luck, but rather by the invisible accumulation of daily choices that seem insignificant in the moment. We have spent the previous sections dismantling the myths of motivation and constructing the frameworks of discipline, focus and recovery, but now we must project these principles forward into the vast horizon of time. Imagine for a moment two parallel versions of yourself standing at the crossroads of today. The first version chooses the path of least resistance, relying on fleeting bursts of emotion to fuel their actions, giving into the comfort of the snooze button and the distraction of the screen and the ease of the skipped workout. For the first week or even the first month, the difference between this version and the disciplined version is negligible, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. But as the laws of compounding interest begin to take effect, the gap widens. Over a year, the disciplined version has read 20 books, while the drifting version has scrolled through 10,000 social media posts. Over 5 years, the disciplined version has built a robust body and a sharp mind, while the drifting version has slowly succumbed to the entropy of aging and neglect. Over 20 years, the divergence becomes so vast that they appear to be two completely different species. This is the terrifying and beautiful truth of the slight edge. The system you build today is not just about getting your work done this week, it is about determining who you will meet in the mirror a decade from now. You are essentially time traveling with every habit you execute, sending a gift to your future self. Conversely, every time you break the system, you are stealing from your future self, borrowing comfort from tomorrow to pay for laziness today. The legacy of discipline is the accumulation of these small gifts. It is the freedom that comes from having finances in order because you respected the habit of saving. It is the vitality that comes from a body that was moved daily. It is the wisdom that comes from a mind that was fed deep work rather than shallow noise. This legacy is not something you leave for others when you die, it is something you live with every single day of your later years. It is the difference between aging with dignity and strength or aging with fragility and regret. Most people look at discipline as a cage, a set of restrictions that limits their enjoyment of life, but this is a fundamental error in perception. Discipline is in fact the only vehicle that can transport you to true freedom. The undisciplined person is a slave to their immediate impulses, a slave to their moods and a slave to the circumstances around them. They cannot do what they want to do because they are controlled by what they feel like doing in the moment. The disciplined person, however, is free. They are free to choose their path and walk it. They are free to set a goal and reach it. They are free from the tyranny of their own weaknesses. This ultimate freedom is the payoff of the system. It allows you to design a life that is truly your own rather than a life that is merely a reaction to the world. As you look forward to the years ahead, you must realize that the pain of discipline weighs ounces while the pain of regret weighs tons. The soreness of a workout lasts an hour, but the pain of a body that has failed you lasts a lifetime. The struggle of deep work lasts a morning, but the pain of unfulfilled potential haunts you forever. You are choosing your pain every single day. The system is simply a tool to help you choose the right pain, the pain of growth rather than the pain of decay. As you continue to walk this path, you will notice that your relationship with time changes. You stop rushing because you trust the process. You stop looking for shortcuts because you know that the long way is the only way. You develop a quiet patience that unnerves the frantic world around you. You become like a mountain, steady and immovable while the weather of trends and fads and panic swirls around you. This stability is the bedrock of leadership. People are naturally drawn to those who have conquered themselves because deep down everyone knows how hard it is. When you master your habits, you become a lighthouse for those who are still lost in the storm of their own impulses. Your very existence becomes a proof of concept that it is possible to live with intention. This is the hidden responsibility of the disciplined. You are not just doing it for yourself, you are doing it to show what is possible. You are raising the standard for your family, your colleagues and your community. When you show up every day, you give others permission to do the same. When you prioritize deep work, you challenge the culture of distraction. When you prioritize rest, you challenge the culture of burnout. Your system becomes a counterculture, a rebellion against the drift of the modern world. And in this rebellion you find a deep and abiding sense of purpose. It is no longer just about productivity, it is about character. It is about forging a soul that is capable of bearing the weight of its own dreams. The system makes you strong enough to carry the load. It prepares you for the opportunities that you cannot yet see. Luck, they say, is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Your habits are your preparation. By keeping the system running, you are ensuring that when your moment comes you will be ready to seize it, not with a frantic grasp but with a steady hand. You are building a vessel that can hold the success you desire. Without the vessel, the success would slip through your fingers like water. So do not despise the days of small beginnings. Do not despise the boredom of the routine. These are the bricks with which you are building your cathedral. Lay each brick with care. Lay each brick with presence. Do not worry about the height of the wall, just focus on laying this one brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. And then do it again. And again. That is the secret. That is the magic. There is no finish line, only the next brick, the legacy of discipline. As we draw the curtains on this exploration of human potential, we must take one final look at the road we have traveled together, because the journey from a life of emotional dependency to a life of systemic discipline is not merely a change in schedule but a revolution of the soul. We began by acknowledging the uncomfortable truth that motivation is a fair weather friend and that relying on it is a guarantee of inconsistency. We dismantled the illusion that we must feel ready to act and replaced it with the ironclad logic of the system. We learned that action is not the fruit of inspiration but the root of it, and that by moving our bodies and engaging our minds we generate the very energy we seek. We built a sanctuary in the first hour of the day, protecting our minds from the chaos of the world so that we could operate from a place of centered authority rather than reactive fear. We carved out blocks of deep focus, turning our attention into a laser capable of cutting through the noise and producing work of enduring value. We identified the keystone habits that hold the arch of our lives together, and we learned to treat our recovery with the same respect as our labor, knowing that a machine that never rests is a machine that will inevitably break. We embraced the humility of the weekly review and the courage of public accountability, understanding that we are flawed creatures who need structure to correct our course. And finally, we accepted that the ultimate goal is not just to check boxes on a list but to shift our very identity until the discipline becomes indistinguishable from our nature. This entire framework is now in your hands. It is a map, but a map is not the territory. Knowing the path is not the same as walking the path. The danger of consuming content like this is that it gives you a false sense of accomplishment. You feel smarter, you feel inspired, and you feel ready, but until you actually lay the first brick, nothing has changed in the real world. The resistance is waiting for you the moment you look away from these words. It is waiting in the notification on your phone, in the comfort of your pillow, and in the whisper of your own mind that says you can start tomorrow. But you must know that tomorrow is a lie. There is only today. There is only this hour. The promise I leave you with is not that it will be easy, because it will not be. There will be days when the system feels like a burden. There will be mornings when the bed feels like a magnet. There will be moments when you question if any of this effort is worth it because the results are not yet visible. In those moments you must hold fast to the vision of the compound effect. You must remember that the bamboo tree grows underground for 5 years before it ever breaks the surface of the soil. You are growing your roots. You are building your foundation. And if you do not quit, if you trust the system more than your feelings, the breakthrough will come. It will not come with fireworks or a parade. It will come as a quiet realization on an ordinary Tuesday that you are no longer the person you used to be. You will look at a challenge that used to crush you and realized it now feels light. You will look at a distraction that used to enslave you and realize it has lost its power. You will realize that you are the captain of your ship and that the storm no longer dictates your direction. This is the ultimate prize. It is the sovereignty of the self. So my final call to you is to stop consuming and start constructing. Do not try to implement everything we discussed at once. Do not try to be perfect. Pick one thing. Pick one keystone habit. Pick one specific time. And make a contract with yourself that you will not break. Defend that small territory with your life. And once you have conquered that inch, take another inch. And then another. The world is filled with people who have big dreams and small discipline. Be the anomaly. Be the person who does the boring work when no one is watching. Be the person who keeps their promises to themselves. Be the person who builds a system so strong that it carries them to heights that motivation alone could never reach. The blueprint is in front of you. The tools are in your hands. The clock is ticking. The only question that remains is simply this: will you step into the arena and build the life you deserve, or will you remain in the stands waiting for a feeling that never comes? The choice is yours and it is made right now. Go build your unstoppable habit.